Change is not made without inconvenience, even from worse to better. Richard Hooker. Hey, and welcome to the show. My name's Robin Jackson, and you're listening to Cult Life, the show that exposes and talks about and educates about all things cult and cult-related. And I'm glad you could join me. Today's show is a very personal one. One that will probably prove to be very therapeutic for me, and I hope will help some listeners to feel just a tad bit better, if not a whole lot. You see, I've been battling feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and self-deprivation, and cutting myself off from friends and family for a long time. And 2 weeks ago, on my morning commute, I was dealt with two shocking blows in 1 week. I normally, on my commute, listen to podcasts because I'm interested in entrepreneurship and I run a little side business. So listening to others, listening to entrepreneurs and how they built their businesses is something that is of very much interest to me, and I educate myself this way. So firstly, the death of Kate Spade by suicide hit me. I had just listened to her original podcast on NPR, where her and her husband spoke about how they built their business and built their brand. And a day later, I woke up to the news of her death. It was quite a blow to my system and the psyche. That very same week, again, I was jolted by the news of Anthony Bourdain's suicide. A man who I admired for being genuine and real. A man who was a great storyteller, and a man whose reality shows were actually real, in my opinion. Anthony and Kate were battling their personal demons and depression. They were in the spotlight, in the limelight, and they too, were battling with their personal demons and depression, just like I was. And this to me was quite a wake-up call. For so long I had been suppressing my battles and my feelings and my personal fights and personal demons. You see, that week I had broken down and cried and literally sobbed 4 times in that week. Something to me was, something was wrong. I knew I had to address it. I knew I had to address the issues and the mental anguish I was experiencing. So when news of these two people's death and their suicide, hit me, I knew I had to do something. I decided to see a professional, firstly a doctor. And I went and saw the doctor, and as I started talking to him, speaking about how I was feeling, my battles and my cult past, it was so strange. We immediately connected. You see, this doctor knew exactly what I was talking about and what I was going through. He and his family had also left an insular and very high control religious group. And we spoke for about an hour, and we connected. And Dr. Carr, I just want to give a shout out to Dr. Conrad Manning. If you are listening to this, thank you very much for connecting and your advice and your assistance. And he advised me to go and see a therapist. He gave me the names of two of the therapists that he normally, advises his or recommends his patients go and see who are dealing with issues of mental illness and depression. So I went and saw a therapist that was recommended by Dr. Manning. We spoke and I let it all out, and I was diagnosed with depression. And we realized that it was my experience within the Jehovah's Witnesses and leaving that group that was part of the problem, amongst other traumas in my life that I had suffered. I never really addressed the issues of isolation and trauma at the time of leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses. As I said, yes, there were other traumatic events during my life that were complicit in adding to what I was experiencing, like the death of a work colleague in front of me, the fact that I could not do anything to help him as he lay there in front of me, and him calling out to me, and the look in his eyes will forever haunt me. I never received counseling for that, after the whole experience. But I want to dwell on my exit from the Jehovah's Witnesses. I think this contributed mostly to a lot of the psychological trauma that I experienced. Their members, as a Jehovah's Witness, typically live peacefully among the greater community, but some who have left organizations like the Jehovah's Witnesses often report lasting psychological effects resulting from, the abuse and the exploitative practices that these groups, practice and what just belonging to this type of group entails. In general, cults are thought of as being dangerous and harmful. That's how we normally see them, as their practices can be very manipulative and can have a detrimental effect on the mental and physical well-being of members. Many people who have left cults report practices of physical and sexual abuse, both of adults and children. Other tactics used to control members within cults include starvation, humiliation, verbal and emotional abuse. Even those who have willingly left a destructive cult may experience, a withdrawal, symptoms of withdrawal or actually withdraw from society. So after leaving a cult, a person may feel guilt, anxiety or depression. Fear is also a common feeling or emotional issue that you got to deal with. Emotional outbursts, and there's often insomnia, amnesia, or sexual dysfunction, and these are all because of the psychological abuse, spiritual abuse, and sometimes physical abuse that many cult members have to endure. Children who are raised in cults may find it difficult to integrate into society, and those who were sexually abused may become hypersexualized and so forth. Many cults urge their members to cut ties with family members and other loved ones who are outside the cult, and this was particularly hard for me growing up. I basically grew up what Jehovah's Witnesses call in a divided household. My dad and I were witnesses. My mum and my sisters never really took to the witness teachings and indoctrination. So it was incredibly hard for me to reconcile, the teaching that and the doctrine that my family, immediate family members, my sisters and my mum, were going to be destroyed at Armageddon because they were not witnesses, together with all my other family were not witnesses. It was incredibly difficult. The emotional trauma that a child or a teenager endures within those situations is very hard. So this, coupled with the flip-flopping doctrine and dogma that plagued my intellect, and the eventual exit, my eventual exit, where I lost close friends and family overnight, because literally that's what happens if you are excommunicated, or you are disfellowshipped, or you leave voluntarily. You literally lose friends and family instantly. And that can be hard for many people. Trying to reintegrate into normal society and to cultivate friendships with outside the group can be very, very hard for some people. So this can cause depression and may culminate in suicide, as many, or attempted suicide, as many former cult members have experienced. And the enormous difficulties that people experience after leaving high control groups include some of the following. And these are things I experienced when I left. Firstly, the typical response or outcome or feeling after leaving a group, it's the feeling of anger or rage towards the group or the leader, towards oneself. You try and suppress the anger in the group. Actually, trying to suppress that actually contributes to the depression and the sense of helplessness. So that's the first feeling, and you speak to many ex and former cult members who leave, who eventually realize that they were lied to, or the indoctrination. They find out about the cover-ups and the indoctrination. It's a feeling of anger, because it's a feeling of time wasted within the group, and so forth. Then there's also the feelings of betrayal. There's feelings of identity confusion and disorientation. There's this pre-cult personality of people who before joining the cult had a certain personality, or and after joining the cult had to conform to the cult practices, the cult thinking, the indoctrination that was imposed on the group. And of course that can be very difficult, because after leaving, trying to integrate outside to the outside world again can be very difficult, because you've got to try and overcome those feelings and that personality again, and trying to reintegrate into society. As I've said before, fear is another enormous factor, that many ex-cult members experience once they're out. The questions arise: what if I am wrong? What if harmful events will actually happen to me? What if what they taught was true? I can't be happy outside the group, and what if I run into a former member? So all these fears and phobias start playing in the ex-cult member's mind, which can add to the depression. Then there's, of course, the intense loneliness for people who have been cut off, who grow up in insular organizations, who've only had friends within the group. So there's this intense loneliness of instantly being cut off. And those former strong and unique bonds that were forged within the group are now gone. It's disappeared overnight. People see you as an outcast, an apostate, or whatever they want to label you as. And it can be very difficult for people to reintegrate into society. There's also feelings of inferiority, feelings of worthlessness, cult leaders continually blame members for mistakes or doctrine. I know the Watchtower, and I'm going to speak a lot about the Watchtower here because this is a very personal issue for me. The Watchtower continuously blames its members for reading, something completely different into what the leadership has said or what the publications have said, and it's never the leader's fault. It's always the members' fault. So, and you are made to feel inferior and worthless. And am I doing this right? Am I conforming? Will I survive Armageddon? All these thoughts start playing in your mind constantly, daily, yearly, and this all can eventually build up and cause depression and mental illness. Then there's also hypersensitivity, because of former or friends and family members that have warned you before you've joined the cult, and now that you've left, you realize that yes, they were right, and there will be arguments, there will be confrontations, and this can be, can lead to anger and frustration. So, and former cult members are normally very hypersensitive to these type of issues. Sleep disorders is another one, including nightmares and insomnia. And remember, within a cult, everything is black and white. There are no gray areas. Cults do not teach to look for gray areas. It's either this way or you're out. It's either you conform or you're out. It's either you adhere to what the leaders or the leadership says, or you're out. And of course, all of the above, all of this that I've mentioned, gives rise to, are big triggers to mental illness, to depression, and it becomes a problem. And this is how cults play on the psyche. This is the effect that cults and high control groups and religions have on people. When I left the Jehovah's Witnesses a few years back, what was very therapeutic for me was writing my 2 books at the time. But I realized now that I needed to speak to someone. I needed to connect. I needed to speak to a professional, speak to a therapist, because I didn't realize that the extent of the damage of 25 years could actually cause, and there's many experiences of other members who felt the same way. I remember years ago, after I've left, a very good friend of mine says that, he told me, and I never took this to heart, and he told me, he said, Robin, you should actually go and get some therapy because, you've left this group. It was a high control group. It was basically a cult. And now you're trying to reintegrate into society. It's affected you. It's affected your family. You need to speak to people. I never did. You need to speak to somebody. I never did. And here's the thing with mental illness and depression. I want to make this very clear. Having a mental illness is not a weakness. It is exactly what it is, an illness that has to be treated. And many people who suffer from mental illness and depression is because they have been strong for so long. They have battled their demons and carried the dark dog along with them for far too long. They eventually reach this breaking point and, break down eventually and need help. I know, speaking from experience. It's incredibly tough dragging yourself out of bed some days. I know it's tough facing the day when all you want to do is lay there in a darkened room and not be bothered by anyone. But I know you got to get up and face the day and face the world, put on a smile while you're crying inside. I know that you cannot just get over it. And I know some days are going to be better than others. If you are listening to this and are battling by yourself, I encourage you to seek professional help. There are people out there who understand what you are going through. You are not alone. To those of you listening and who have family members or friends who are battling to cope, be there for them. Encourage them to seek help. No matter how people leave a cult, they will probably need assistance in dealing with feelings, future plans, and re-entry into normal society. In addition to psychological care of individuals and group therapy, and sometimes as well as what they call exit counseling, they might require medical and or dental care, nutrition and rest, education, job counseling, and so forth, because many of these cults are very insular, as I said, and people are shut off from normal society. And for them to be reintegrated once again into normal society, they will need assistance. So, they will need. Some of them will need housing, material help, anything from clothes to furniture to a new social network, so to speak. So I encourage you to assist and point them in the right direction. As for me, I'm doing fine. I'm dealing with it. I'm getting professional help now and taking the medication. I want to appreciate, and I appreciate you guys listening in from all over the world. Please point somebody in the right direction. Point somebody to get some help. If there are people and former cult members in your circle who need the assistance. I appreciate you guys listening in from all over the world. Thanks for joining me today. Follow me on Twitter at RobinJackson70 and feel free to connect. Until next week, that is Cult Life for this week. Bye for now.